Hello, everybody. I am Melissa Forziat. I'm a motivational keynote speaker. My topic is Take the Donut, another way to say Carpe Diem. And it's time for another message from Melissa. And this month, something that I wanted to focus on. So, look, we've talked about imposter syndrome before. We've talked about this idea that sometimes you're in a situation where you don't feel like, oh, should I be here? I don't know that I deserve this. You doubt yourself. And one thing that I've been thinking about this month, I wanted to look back on a time of my life where it was a really good professional experience that I look back on now, but I was a little bit scared about it at the time. So earlier in my career, I worked major international sport events. I worked Olympic Winter Games, for example. One of the jobs that I had was with the 2010 Olympic Winter Games in Vancouver. And I was one of the people, I worked at that for that organizing committee for maybe 2 years. I was there far before the Olympic Games started. So for my press operations team, we were responsible for making sure that the media had what they needed to do their job. We were organizing all of the logistics required. And when you start a job like that, way before, years before the event, you have a small team of people who were kind of looking after every venue, thinking really big picture and having big picture conversations to make sure that the media are going to get what they need and that you're planning accordingly. But when you get closer and closer to the event, you need to start hiring more people, having more attention to detail, having people, a whole team at each specific venue to carry out the plans, to make sure things are moving smoothly, that there's a presence on the ground. So as we were getting closer to the Olympic Games, we were hiring more and more people to execute the vision of what our small core team had been planning. And I was given a choice. My boss, who was the head of our sort of subdivision of press operations, said to me, two options for you. You can either be the manager of one of the venues, or you could be my second in command, overseeing all of the city venues. And that wasn't really a thing. That was a job that he was constructing. Like it wasn't, I think, something that had been in the plan exactly. Um, but it was something that was being presented to me, and it meant the world to me. I was a workaholic. I just bled for my job. It was so important to me, and to be asked that question, I was so flattered. And I guess the easiest thing to do would have been to say, I'll be the manager of one of the venues, like the rest of the core team. The rest of the core team had picked the venues that they wanted to be at. I could have done that. I could have had my pick of whatever venue I wanted to be the press manager for. But instead, I said, let's do this second in command thing. And I didn't know what it meant. And so we sat down, we talked about it. We worked out what that would look like. And then now that he knew, okay, here's where our core team is going to be, here's the other positions we need to hire for. So they started looking for press managers for all of the venues. But here's the thing, I was going to be like overseeing all of the city venues. And when I started to see the people who were being hired to work those venues, I started to become very intimidated. I was like, these people, in many cases, they're at least twice my age. They've got way more experience than I do. So what business do I have telling them what to do? I felt none. I didn't think I had any business telling these people what to do. And this was something that I grappled with for weeks as we started to hire people, their contracts were getting signed, we were putting them in place, we were starting to onboard them. And I thought, how do I do this job? How do I do this job without insulting them? How do I do this job in a way that they'll accept me and consider me a resource? And I gave it a ton of thought. And so the way that it ended up sort of working out, when I handed over the venues I had been managing, I gave people all of the information. I handed them the binder. I did a complete download of everything that was in my head. And then I said, this is yours now. Like, you do what you need to do with this. I empowered them to make their choices. I said, look, I'm here if you need questions answered, but I also assume that you're going to come up with far more up-to-date information than I'm going to in the weeks ahead. So I empowered them. I released all the venues that I was looking at. And then I started to think, how can I now just be a resource? I am not more experienced than they are. But here's what I know. I have been, I can see all of the venues at once. I know who's dealing with what. I know what problems may be coming up that they need to prepare for. I have the visibility to everything that they don't have. So I can at least be a resource in that regard. I made it a point once they started being deployed to their venues, I made it a point to visit all of them when there was no problem. I made it a point to visit them and say, okay, here's some things that are happening at other venues. I don't know if it'll happen here, but here's how they've been solving them. I gave them heads up on things. I would check in with them when there were no problems. And by the time we got to the Olympics, they treated me as a resource, not as somebody who would hire or fire them, not as somebody who would chastise them, but as somebody who could give them information, as somebody who they could say, look, I'm noticing this thing. Have you seen this anywhere else? I became somebody that they trusted as a sharer of information. And I believe that ended up being a good thing for everybody. They celebrated their wins with me, things that I had handed over and said, oh, this is a problem I wasn't able to solve. Can you do something about it? And when they would solve those problems, because they were fully attentive to their venue, they'd come to me and we'd celebrate the win together. I'll never forget that these people who were way more experienced than I was embraced the role that had been created for me, that I was trying to create for myself. They embraced it. They fully accepted me as overseeing their venue, all the city venues, and they welcomed it. And I think there was incredible generosity in that. I ended up coming away from that feeling that it was such a rewarding professional experience for me. And I try to remember that. And here's the lesson that I wanted to share with you, because I know this was a long story and you might be thinking, what's the lesson here? The lesson is, what do you offer? In that moment when you're thinking, I don't know why they brought me in for this, like in that moment, what is it that you can bring to the table? It doesn't mean that you are better than anybody else. It means that this is the function that you play in this team, in this unit, in this community. And you definitely bring something to the table. There's some information, there's some relationship, there's some energy, there's a demeanor. You have something that you bring. There's an experience that you can share. Whatever it is, you can bring that to the table, and so can they. And the question is, how can you add it all together to create a better team, to create a better unit? What do you offer? You offer something, I promise you. And it's just a question of asking yourself what. So if this is something that you're encountering right now in your world, if you are currently questioning your value in a group, I hope that you'll ask yourself this question so that you can start finding the answers that you need. Because if I could do it, you could definitely do it too. Take care, everybody.